Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the Right People, Right Places podcast. I'm your host, Raul Mendoza, and I have the absolute honor and privilege of having Mike Thorne here on the podcast today. And he's someone that embodies the idea in both his story and his work, this idea of humanizing leadership. We are in quite the transition generationally with a new generation of leaders coming up, and we've got many leaders that are heading towards retirement. And I'm really excited to have Mike on to talk about a variety of different subjects. But just to give you a little background on him, he's a Vistage Chair, executive coach, author, and the founder of Ask Inside and North Star Rising. He spent more than 25 years leading companies ranging 35 million to 300 million across industries like sporting goods, consumer products, and manufacturing. But really, what Mike sets Mike apart, and just in conversations I've had with him leading up to this podcast episode, is how he's achieved not only the success as an executive leader, but how he's able to help leaders kind of bring their humanity through transparency, through purpose, through inspiration. And he believes in starting with people and listening. It's not just about the profit and loss statement. And he experienced a turning point in his career, which we'll get into here as we get into his story. But Mike, again, so glad to have you on. Thank you for joining us today.
I appreciate having me, and I appreciate the work you're doing because it's much needed in today's workforce. So thank you for doing the work you're doing.
No, absolutely. Well, let's kick into it. I think, as I always like to do with our podcast episode here, is just it's all about story, right? And I'd love for our audience to get a flavor for your story and your background, and just kind of dive in there, and then we can kind of weave into the rest of what we have in mind to talk about today.
Right. So I grew up in the beautiful state of Massachusetts, in central Massachusetts, and have an older brother, younger sister, and we spent most of our life in Massachusetts. I then have lived in 8 other states in my career. I have a wife who married 35 years, 3 daughters,
Amazing.
34, 32, and 30. Her oldest is community-based healthcare work that she does as a therapist. Our middle daughter is a second grade teacher, and our youngest is a assistant principal of a school down in Tennessee for special needs. And the business side of it, my career started in business development and sales for the first half, and then the second half was going into companies across multiple industries. And being the person to go in there and reimagine the business, I was never the subject matter expert. And so I had to be really, really good at not just strategy, understanding the business of people. And in 2020, at the end of 2020, I realized that the world was shifting, leadership was shifting, and I decided to get involved with executive coaching through Vistage. And that is leadership coaching with CEOs and people that work for the CEOs. And I'm excited to have a bigger impact than just one company impact employees. And that's the work I do today. And we live in a beautiful state of Maine right now.
Fantastic. Thank you for that background. Amazing. 35 years of marriage. That's incredible. Children, family, and a great career. And I alluded to it in kind of the intro here to our audience. But you experienced a turning point, and even before we get to that, just to say, I love the work that you do as a Vistage chair. I go into these episodes and I'm excited for my audience, but I'm actually personally excited to be able to learn from the wealth of experience that you bring. And I'm so thankful for what Vistage does and being able to create these contexts and just the incredible network internationally that they provide here. So again, I appreciate the work that you do, and I'm sure the CEOs that you work with appreciate it. I'm so thankful for my CEO group here in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. It's been a game changer for me. So again, just wanted to highlight that. But yeah, with regards to that turning point, you kind of touched on it a little bit, and you learned a truth about leadership the day you got fired. And that's one of the things that kind of stood out to me in your LinkedIn profile and even in our conversations was your transparency and candor with a very hard moment that you faced. And um, would love to kind of dive into that and kind of hear about, what was it that you learned about leadership there, and why was that such a significant turning point for you?
I was 40 years old, had been married 25 years, 3 kids, and I'd started out in sales and worked my way up to get hired as the president of Russell Athletic Team Sports. So for people that knew me, at least they thought they knew me, and people that observed my career thought, wow, this guy's had like this perfect business career. I was an athlete, had a chance to be fortunate enough to be a captain of some teams in high school and college. So people will look at all that and say it was an incredible journey. And I was at 40, had it all. And deep down, and all of it revolves back to my adoption story. Is when I went into that job, I was not prepared. I didn't have the skills to do that job, and I didn't get a lot of training for it. And what showed up for me was when the pressure started hitting, I started pushing back, and both in
Mm,
my behaviors and body language was not helpful to an organization going through a lot of transformation or needed transformation. And I got
mm,
fired less than 15 months getting into that job. Very soul crushing, very humiliating. And I went back to my 9-year old self when I was told I was adopted, which was the soul crushing moment of my life. And from 9 to 40, I
mm,
hid behind that the entire time, and I kept score based on everything I just mentioned. I'm married
yeah.
all these years. That's not a way to run
Hmm.
life. And so when I
Right.
got fired, I was down. And I think the biggest turning point for me was I was so focused on the profit and loss of the business and getting that turned around. But the feedback I got from employees was they value the amount of time, energy I poured into them to understand them first to help the business get better. And that was probably that by far was the biggest aha moment for me was like, well, maybe I'm focusing the wrong P&L. The real P&L is people and listening. And so from 40, now I'm 61, I've spent the last 21 years as I go to new companies and go through this experience trying to make sure that A, the values and purpose of the organizations I work with mirror what I believe in, and two, make sure that I work with people that have that same value so that we can push this thought process throughout the organization. That was a big turning point. Up until that point, I was just measuring myself based on titles, salaries, and all that kind of stuff, which was so
Accomplishments.
wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow, Mike. I appreciate your transparency, and I love how you don't mince words when it comes to this idea of our personal side, and even bringing things through from your childhood. And these are real things, right? Like,
Yep.
I think a lot of the time CEOs and leaders try to compartmentalize their life and business, and there is wisdom to that. There is reasons for that. I can understand all the reasons, but I think it's unfortunately what can happen so often when that compartmentalization happens is you begin to kind of suppress those things, and you don't face them, and you don't realize that these things actually play into who you are and how you show up in life, and how you show up in business, right? Like, so I appreciate how you shared it. I think there's such wisdom that's needed. I feel like I'm still learning this. I'm 41 years old, with 4 children and my fifth on the way. And the idea, there is something about transparency and vulnerability that's powerful. Um, and I just love how you touch into it in a powerful way there, where you mention it and you share it, because it is a part of your journey, and it is a part of this turning point that was for the better, actually. And I think it's something, it's refreshing to hear that from a leader that comes from a generation where things can be very much about putting your best foot forward, and muscling through things. And you know what I mean, to have someone that is being transparent and honest in this way is powerful. So thanks for sharing that. I think that's I guess let me ask this question with that. And maybe this is a selfish question for me, but
Yep.
just to say, when it comes to transparency, vulnerability in a leader, what would you say is too much, or I can struggle with this personally sometimes, like oversharing or what not to share. uh what would you say are good guidelines or frameworks to have in mind as you, because transparency builds trust, right? And we want to be transparent leaders because at the end of the day we want people to be able to be feel safe enough to share the real issues, right? But that requires us to put our life and our experience on the line. So I'd love to hear from you on that.
That's not an easy question, do A, B, or C. So I'm trying to figure out how to frame this in a simple manner. I think the
Yeah.
big thing is less is more. Like you don't want to just go out and throw up all over yourself and say all these things. But what I would give you an example. I went to work for a company, and a lady there who was head of learning and development was the first person who she had her own trauma that she dealt with and really picked up very quickly with me that I was struggling with my ability to just let go of who I was. And so a couple things happened. One is she told me one day that my employees, who had been there 3 or 4 months, she said, my leadership team calls me dad. And she said, "Do you know why they call you dad?" And I said, "I have no idea. Is that a good or bad thing?" And she said, "Well, they call you dad because some days you're in a good mood and some days you're not. And they're not sure which one's going to show up that day. So they don't know how to behave around you."
Mm-hmm.
So she really, and that was hard to hear,
Yeah.
really hard to hear. But the key thing is that you have to surround yourself with a trusted community, as I refer to it, not a
Mm-hmm.
transactional community. And immediately I felt very confident and comfortable around her. And she said, "Mike, I think you have this question in your head that you're afraid to say out loud."
Mm-hmm.
And if I had heard that from other people, I might have said, I don't have time for you. I'm the leader here. Just do what I tell you to go do because I'm the
Yeah.
president. But the way she interacted with me, and it took a few months for us to build that relationship. She said, if someone really knew you, Mike, would they even like you? And I
Hmm.
never thought of that question, but it was very true. I was afraid that if I ever shared who I really was and what I had going on, that I didn't have all the answers, that people wouldn't like me and I would be abandoned again. Now, this is very specific to me with my
Right.
own situation. But I would say, having coached hundreds of people and been around organizations for all these years, the majority of people have some trauma that happened to them, some more significant than others, but some version of it or something that was said to them that has them question themselves all the time and it's stuck with them for whatever reason. And it's like they feel they're tied to jail. So anytime they're getting challenged with a question, they do lead from control, like do this because I told you to, a command. And that's dangerous. It doesn't get you your best performance from your people. They comply with you, but they don't elevate for you. I think that's why it's so important. And when she walked me through all that, her first thing, to get back to your original question, was, "Hey, Mike, just start walking the floor." I had 100 people, and just
Mm-hmm.
ask people how their weekend was. Tell them about your weekend, which may sound really simple to you or your audience, but to me, that was scary because if I told them everything didn't go perfectly that weekend, I would think they'd be looking at me in a meeting like I was less than. That was my hangup. And so
Right.
that was a very simple step, not dangerous, very simple. But people started to get to know me and they knew my kids and they started to say, "Oh my gosh, I didn't know that. Oh, that's so funny." And then over time, after that was taking place, she said, "I want you to now." We were part of Toastmasters, which is an organization that teaches you how to speak publicly.
Yeah.
And she said, "I want you to do the 5-minute Toastmasters and tell your adoption story." So that was like another big step that I took. And when I did the adoption story, that was vulnerability for me, but the employees saw it as, wow, that's so powerful. I want to know this person. And that opened up even more. So it's that slow to go fast or do small to go big. Those are two small things. Interacting with the organization, again, for me, that was a hard thing because I was so
Mm-hmm.
focused on driving results. And then the second thing was telling a very vulnerable story, but a real story about my adoption, which at 41, I'd never told that story before.
Amazing.
And then over time, you can start to share more. I remember a few years later, I was asked by her, "Hey, Mike, why is it that you get angry? Like, what is it?" I said, well, they're not doing their job or people aren't get performing or whatever. And she said, no, what's the root of it?
Mm,
And I'm shortening a lot for time, but the big thing I uncovered
sure.
was when I'm very, very tired, I don't lead very well. And
Mm,
to say that out loud was really hard. And so I had meetings where I literally had a senior leader of mine, and I said to her, I said, when I go like this, or she was her idea, if I go like this, well, that means I'm really tired. I don't want to make a decision this meeting because I'm not going to make a good one and I may say the wrong things. Can we table the discussion until later? That worked for a little bit until I realized I just got to tell them I don't make a decision. I'm tired and be okay with that. So those are like little evolutions. So over
wow.
time, I felt more comfortable saying, hey guys, I am super tired today. What are the chances? Is another framing of things that works really well. What are the chances we could table this decision? I'll make it in the morning. In some cases, like Mike, we got to make it now and I have to go make it. But more often than not, they'd say, that's fine. They understood me that I made better decisions when I wasn't tired and I made better connections with people because they realized I was being candid with them. There's
So
just
good.
some examples of things that I had to do for myself, but I had good coaching. I had people around me that were willing to tell me what they observed and what they saw. And then I was comfortable listening to them and taking their advice and then managing forward.
Love it. Love it. I mean, that requires such humility and awareness. I
Mm.
think, um, yeah, even as I'm hearing you say those things, it takes courage to be humble and aware in those positions. And um, I think, another question that kind of comes up for me with this is because I hear this from leaders as well as I talk with different organizations, leaders from different organizations. They do all the right things. They are relational, they are transparent. But then there's the other side of being those things and then people taking advantage of you or misrepresenting you or hurting you in some way. And that's just kind of part of the territory of being a leader. I even think about fatherhood. I can associate it to that. It's like you get the reason that marriage and raising kids is such a beautiful thing is you get so close and you're able to really impart who you are and those values to your children and your marriage. But there's also such an opportunity for hurt, right? Because you're so close. So how do you?
Yes.
I'd love to hear just from you on say we're doing all the right things, we're being transparent, we're telling our story, we're walking the floor, getting to know people, but then that turns awry. How? Well, first of all, is there a way of preventing that? And second, when it does happen, what should be our response, and how should we navigate that as leaders?
One of the things that happens is on the business side of things, we have to reach a point where we can connect versus confront. So if there are challenges on the business side of it, a lot of leaders want to confront it. We got to tackle this. We got to deal with it, which just causes stress. And so I think to your point, you just mentioned you're trying to, as a leader, connecting with your people and all that. That's great. But the numbers, the business is the business. You got to deliver the results. That's one thing I learned early on
Mm,
where you can be really good at this. What I would say is that you have to be relatable. So I'll give an example. You have a business situation, either you're coming new to a business or a crisis happens or a very difficult decision has to be made. Either someone pushed it down to you, it could be your manager, you got pushed something pushed. And so one of the things I got from a salesperson for me one time, she said to me, she goes, Mike, I don't always agree with your decisions. Now, I was the president of the business. She was, a salesperson, not even the manager, the director, the VP, an open door policy. And I was like, okay, where is this going? And she said, but I want to just tell you that the organization has a higher respect the way you go about making those decisions. And when I got into the conversation, what I learned, this is back when I was 41, 42, has served me very well to get to your question.
hmm
She said, you always explain to us why something has to even take place. Like, why are we having the conversation? And then the second, and I'm going to paraphrase it, but what I walked, what it was, okay, so
Yeah.
walk people through the situation that you're
Yeah.
dealing with. Like, why am I having to challenge everybody? And why am I going to have to make this a very serious conversation versus I'm this nice guy as the leader? And she said the second thing you do is that you share with us that not only do we have this situation, you share with us how you went about trying to figure out how to handle the particular situation. You talk to people internal, you talk to people external. So you got various perspectives from various people to try to look at what all the options were. And then you laid out what the options that were considered and the pluses and minuses of those options. And she said at the end of the day, only one person can make that decision. And if you make the wrong ones, you won't be here very long. This is her, right? It's kind of funny.
Yeah.
But she said, we respect the fact that one person has to make the decision. The one step I took further, which I think will hopefully
Huh.
help leaders on that, is
Yeah.
when you have to share, I got to downsize, we have to drive the business higher, we got whatever it is, instead of just saying, hey, the business is doing this, we need to do this, the average employee probably can't relate to that. All they're worried about is, do I have a job? Do I not have a job? I get paid, not get paid. But if you can frame it in a way and saying, look, the company was doing X amount of volume, and we actually are only doing this amount, which means we're making less we need to, so we need to course correct. But that has some people will get that. But if you say to people, hey, how many of in here have a salary? And you just put a salary on the board that's relevant to the audience. So say $50,000.
Mm-hmm.
And you say you make 50,000, you have taxes taking out of that, and your net is, I'm making numbers up, 35.
Yeah.
And people can go, I get that. And then you say, what other expenses do you have when you get that 35,000 net? People raise the hand, rent, travel, car, whatever all the expenses are. And it's okay, you net out 5,000 of the year. What do you do with that 5,000? And people will say, I want to travel or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And I say now, if I say to you, you're only going to make a net of 28 versus 35, what do you do? And they said, well, we got to make some changes. I mean, I still got to pay the mortgage, but I won't do the vacation or I won't do this, I won't do that. Then you can go relate that to the business
Mm.
and say, hey, we have when you do that, and then you just say to people, I need help. I think those are the three most powerful words in life, other than I love you. I need help. We're going to have to make some adjustments. People are then saying, I can appreciate why, because I get this, because I live this every day. They can more connect to what you're talking about, and they'll respect that you got to make some changes, because guess what? If you don't, they won't have a job.
Right.
And so that's one of the ways that you still command that you have to make the tough choices. You're in charge of the business. Somebody has to make it, but you're making it relatable and you're connecting versus confronting and trying to attack people and say, hey, we screwed up. This is a problem. We got to do this or that. That's a big difference, I think, for people that are in leadership roles that can help them overcome the fact they're worried about just being the nice guy all the time. You have to command the business in a
Yes.
way that people trust that you understand the business, but you also respect that people have their own life and challenges. You can relate those to them. When you do make change, people won't always agree with you and they
Yeah.
won't be happy about the choices. Maybe their friend's going to lose a job or something, but they will respect the fact that you took the time to walk everybody through what's going on, why you're making change. There's logic. You take the emotion out of it, but you explain to them what's going on, and then you make the choices. If you make good ones, people will learn to respect that as you go along. Is really what I would share as a way to go about what you asked.
Wow. I mean, that's gold. I love what you're saying there. There's so much there. Um, yeah, I'm just taking in what you just said. I think I love what you said about um, connecting instead of commanding with people. It's the key is to connect with people, but to command your business, right? And if you connect with people and you command your business, then you have a bridge. Connection forges a bridge of communication, of relatability. That hey, look, I see you, I hear you, I know what's going on. I know what's important to you, but this is the reality. This is where we're at as a business, and having that dialogue. And I see why it's so important to forge that connection. And I see why that vulnerability is so important, because when you have the hard conversations, it doesn't become something where we're attacking the conflict or confronting, right? Like you were saying, instead of confronting, you're connecting. And in the connection, you're it's like you're coming alongside the individual rather than coming coming into their space and or into their face about it, it's interesting you saying all these things because I can I can picture, even as I'm hearing you say these things, I'm picturing myself in different situations with different leaders and different scenarios. And I'm just thinking to myself, goodness, like I think that I just think leadership's messy. There's just no other way to put it. Like
Right.
I feel like, as I'm hearing you, I feel encouraged because I'm like, okay, I know that I've tried to do these things in the best way I can. And I feel like there would be many leaders that would hear what you said that would have those intentions and have done them, but then they hear this and they think to themselves, gosh, I could have done it. Maybe I could have tweaked this word. Maybe I could have said this. But I love what you said that I thought was so key. It doesn't matter, I think, at the end of the day, whatever your heart is in these things, it will come through.
Right.
Your true intentions are going to come through, whether you said it correctly or not. And unfortunately, the bad part about leadership, it just comes with the territory of leadership
Yeah.
is you're going to make some people unhappy. Yeah, that's just part of the territory. So I just love how you painted that picture because I feel like it brings a lot of resolution to leaders like myself. And I know folks that I talk to where it's like, you know what, I think we're doing the right things. But at the end of the day, even if we are doing all the right things, and even if we could have said this little thing better or this, it doesn't really make a difference, because at the end of the day, people are either going to receive it or not, and people are going to be unhappy with it or not. And you just can't make everyone happy.
Well, one of the things I didn't mention that, based on what you just said, might be another
Yeah.
helpful for people
Yeah.
is if you're in a leadership position and you're struggling, the business isn't working or performing, there are three questions that you can ask. And I would suggest going around to people at all levels of the organization. Typically, leaders don't have all the answers. It's usually the people in the business.
Yeah.
And I've done this exercise going to a company saying, boy, what is going on? It feels like we're just off kilter. And you just walk around and ask people three questions. One, hey, what are we doing really, really well around here that we should do more of? You get a list of those answers. What are we doing around here that we should either do less of or stop doing? And you get a long list. That's always one has the longest list. And the last question, which a lot of leaders I found are very wary about asking because they're afraid that it's going to be about salary, and that is, what is it that I can do for you personally or professionally? And when you ask those three questions, depending on the size of the organization, you can ask, all different parts of it. You're going to start landing on very consistent feedback on what we need to do better, what we should do more of, and
Mm,
then what people are looking for personally, professionally. And that'll give you signals, and you start to build this grid. And you're like, wow, the item that keeps popping up is this, and this. And you can kind of score it. And then the big thing is you got to go back to people and tell them that you actually heard them, because otherwise they feel like you took all this information and didn't do anything about it. And when you get that information, what I would suggest is you take the easiest possible thing to address and get momentum. A business is all about getting momentum. And
oh, so true.
I had so many small little things that people would ask, and I'd sit there and go, our biggest problem in this $300 million company is that we don't have cartridges for ink at the printer, and yet the business is struggling, and that's the biggest thing we're here to talk about. But instead of judging that, you would take care of that particular problem that's been annoying people, and you're like, whoa, maybe this guy will actually take action on stuff. So pick the one that seems really ridiculous or small, but that momentum will build on the second. Because the other thing I say to
Yes.
people is we have to be aggressively patient. And everyone says, oh, Mike, how do you do both those things? There are some things you're going to find out about or things you need to address and that you can take action on quickly, either because they're very fixable and they would drive revenue or help offset issues, or get momentum in the business. Other things are going to take a lot of work. And I find a lot of leaders have so much going on. They want to just be the answer person and fix everything at once, but they're not really addressing the root of what's happening. They're addressing the symptoms. And so that's the other thing I would
So
say is
good.
take a look at that list, find the ones that are really get some momentum on them, and then work with the team and let them own some of this stuff, because a lot of times they have the answers, I'll give you one. We had an issue one time in our ink printing machines and manufacturing. We were creating all this product that was not working. Your T-shirt came out terribly. Short story is I went down to the plant, and the leadership was telling me that it's not their fault. All this stuff. I found the guy, 20 something years old, who was doing all the printing, and I asked him those three questions. And the last question was, "What can I do for you personally, professionally?" And he said, "If we could go back to the original ink we were using, I would take this $1 million problem to be gone." And I said, "Excuse me?" He said, "We changed ink a couple months ago to save $29,000 on a $128 million business." And he said, "It's causing all these issues." And I said, "Well, didn't anybody say anything?" He said, "No one listens to me." I called the leader over there. He said, "Yeah, we did change. You were on the cost saving initiative." And I said, "John, we just spent $1 million in inventory. We got to go all remake. We got to go back to the original ink so we won't have all these problems." But I never would have got that because the leadership was telling me one thing when I went to the person who's actually doing the work and asked those three questions. And man, once that happened, people were like, okay, maybe this guy will listen. And then these culture carriers come into the business who are all over the company that are the most respected employees that everyone looks to. They'll start telling you what's going on. You can start to build back momentum and morale in the company, or just get momentum in the business from the bottom up versus top down many times.
Wow,
Same,
that
same
is
with
so
customers.
good. Yeah.
Sometimes your customers will do the same thing for you if you ask them those three questions.
Mm. Wow, that's fantastic. I mean, what a wonderful line of questioning to have to support this idea of people and listening. I
Yeah,
think um you can't really listen unless you ask questions, right? And
yeah.
here's something where you can really draw people in. And you mentioned this idea of um culture carriers, which is I think is a very interesting idea, like recognizing culture carriers within an organization. And even as we kind of look at the future of leadership and kind of round out our conversation here, so much I feel I think I'm seeing a part two come up here in our
It's all
future
right. I
because
love this stuff,
because
so happy to help.
I, I I mean it's just so powerful here. But I think before we wrap up here, I want to talk about this idea of culture carriers, this idea of people and listening, which you just gave a wonderful framework and tool that I think I know that I can take this and go to my business and say, and to my clients, and create partnerships, right? That's what it's about. And you're calling it culture carriers here. Tell me about this. Maybe kind of share a little bit more about what you think about the identification of culture carriers. Does it come up? Do you identify them as you're getting to know those players, or can you see them walking into your office? Like, I guess maybe give us some insight into how we can identify these individuals within our organization. And even, I guess, on the other side of it, on the customer side, advocates, which, customer advocates, right? I think it carries that same idea, but would love to hear what you think in that respect.
Let's start with the internal organization. What my experience is when you are dealing, let's say you're an existing business and suddenly things change. Either you could have a big opportunity in front of you or a big risk. And you're like, boy, how do I know which way to go? Do I go left or right or whatever? And oftentimes, your own organization, when you ask those three questions, because that would be what I would do. I would go, so let's go talk to some people, and you ask your leaders, who should I talk to in the organization? They will mention people to you. And when you get to those people, they may be the kind, it all depends. Every organization is different, but you will quickly see whether that leader gave, not that you shouldn't talk to the leadership, by the way. I don't want to leave the leadership team can be very helpful, but
Right.
often they're
Right.
just trying to protect themselves and the organization. So you want to get to really what's happening. They will
Right.
lead you to people, and you might get somebody who's just a talking piece for that leader. You don't know. But what you'll often hear is, if you really want to know what's going on here, you should talk to so and so. If you really want to figure that out, you might want to talk to so and so. So employees will lead you to the employees who they find are the most respected. These are the people in the organization when something is going on, good or bad, or change is happening. You as an individual go to that person and say, hey, Mike, what do you think's going on here? Is this going to be okay? And so when you're talking to people and they say you should talk to so and so, your alert should go up and say this could be somebody who everybody in the company respects. You go through that process of asking those questions. What will then happen is there'll be people that either you interviewed that will come by your office another day or two later. You just wait, be patient, don't rush, don't say, I think it's this person, and say that must be the culture carrier. You wait. And a day, 2 days go by, you'll get an email, that person will stop by, or somebody else will stop by and said, I know you've been talking to people. Kurt said I should come by and talk to you. Do you have a minute? Then you'll know those are the people that are most likely the culture carriers.
Mm,
When it comes to the customers, your salespeople are usually the ones that know who the right clients are to talk to, because you want to make sure if you're going to ask those three questions, you got people that are in business. They want to see you be successful. Part of the reason why leaders don't want to ask the customers, they're afraid to get exposed for all their problems. When in reality is they don't realize that I've got a customer who's relying on us to deliver this service or product to them. They want us to be really good at it. So they want to help
yeah.
us, but we just never ask them. And so your salespeople, again, will lead you to certain clients and certain people. And then the same thing's going to happen. The senior leader, you might say to you, hey, you might want to talk to my planner. I'll give you an example. When I was
Mm,
26, this was a big client of mine. I reached out to the buyer. We were having a conversation about a recent trust research project that our company did. And I asked him about it. He said, yeah, I filled it out. He said, you want to talk about it? I said, yes. And he said, Mike, you are the most knowledgeable salesperson I do business with. You know your company, your products, your industry very, very well. And your brand name is so important. I have to carry your products. He
hmm.
said, but you are missing significant business opportunities because you're not spending time with my team. And I thought to myself, well, you're the buyer. Why should I spend time with them? He said, they want to help you and we want to help you, but you never ask the questions. You never understand what's going on outside just selling product. And so, shortening that story, it was like a big
Huh.
aha moment. And I started spending time with a team that actually makes things happen inside the company versus just the buyer. So I could become a solution provider versus just a service provider. That was a big change with the clients also. So those are things that I would spend time on as, in a role that you have running a company or as a leader, what have you, or family.
Totally. Oh, this is good stuff. I mean, yes, I think so applicable on so many sides
Yeah.
here. It's just tried and true wisdom, and it doesn't matter how much technology is advancing. I mean, this is the hard stuff of leadership. This is the real stuff of business. It's relationship, and this is why I'm so excited about having you on and share about these things, because these are things you can't. And I guess that answers my question about intuition. Like, your intuition is formed as you're having conversations with people, as you're talking, as you're observing, as you're making note of, okay, that person responded, and like they're coming into my office. They invited someone else to come and engage in this conversation for us to solve this problem. And those are things to watch for. It's like I think it's so often we're trying to, even in me asking the question, I was trying to understand a profile because that's what I do. I'm in recruiting. I want a
Yeah.
profile
Yeah.
because profiles are nice. It's a nice little box that we can fit people into. But yeah, that's a helpful thing. But unfortunately, what that can do is that can lead to forming bias instead of being unbiased through understanding asking questions and listening. And I love that idea of forming intuition from your own ideas and experience, which there's validity to that, right? But it can't form the entire picture in an accurate way, right? So I think what you shared was fantastic there.
Even as a recruiter, one of my favorite things to do when I was interviewing for a job, I would always do two things. One would be, what is the one thing that I don't know? So it depends which side of the equation. If you're
Yeah.
recruiting for a company, you might ask the question, what is the one thing about you that I'll never learn in an interview, but I will learn? Because this is I don't have the science behind this, but it's very often what happens.
Yeah.
5 months, someone's newly employed in the company. A stress point is going to hit. and the employee that you just hired is going to be exposed for something. Some trigger is going to happen. You're like, oh my God, I wish I knew this. You will never uncover that in an interview, or very rarely. So I always ask the question of people, and there's usually you get a
Hmm.
really great insight, which is, what's the one thing they'll never learn about you in an interview, but I'll find out 3 to 6 months into your employment when a pressure point hits. That's one. And then when you finish that question, the second thing I want to know is, how consistent is this person across their life? Are they someone who I can trust? And so I'll say to them, I'm just curious, if I was to reach out to your parents and I just said your name, hey, I just ran into your son, Michael, and immediately they would say, what about you? And I want them to give me exactly whatever that word is, or two words. If I asked your friends, if I asked your siblings, and if I get a lot of different answers, or I get a lot of stuff that's inconsistent, or they can't really answer it, it makes me wonder if I'm going to be putting this person into a critical position in the company, whether they're really someone I can count on to be a leader, or that could be taught to be a leader because they don't have the foundational skills. And that would worry me. I'd want to probe a little further on that. But so on the
Yeah.
recruiting side of it, those are really a couple areas that I found to be really insightful for me to probe further. If someone I was really high on, or the company that was everyone hired this person, I'd have a pause and want to study that more. That's been my experience, because those are two areas that can be scary when that happens. You're like, oh my God, I had no idea this person couldn't handle this, or they're very inconsistent in their behavior. From a recruiting standpoint, hopefully you can catch that before they get into the building.
Totally. No, I think that's a wonderful question, and it's you very quickly you'll either realize you're getting a straightforward answer or not, right?
Yeah.
I think that's an excellent tool. A lot of our audience are owner operators of recruiting companies, and so along with CEOs and executive suite and C suite. So I think that's an incredible. The thing is, at the end of the day, whether you're an agency operator or you're a CEO, one of our major jobs is we're always recruiting, right? We're always looking for great people. So I think having questions like this in our tool belt that we can pull out in conversation to really get to the heart of matters is fantastic. So appreciate you sharing that. And I think this kind of leads to, even as we kind of close here, I think a lot of what you're sharing is encapsulated in your North Star Rising framework. And I'm assuming that a lot of what you've shared is kind of touched into that. But I wanted to kind of, even as we're wrapping up here, allow for opportunity for you to speak on North Star, and um, how does it help leaders lead with clarity and courage, and get your thoughts there.
Oh, 4 or 5 years ago, I had a lot of people that I was talking to who were struggling with where they want to go, why they want to get to, and didn't have that clarity. So I created this framework. It's evolved into this North Star Rising, which is, what is your North Star? Like, where do you really want to get to personally and professionally? And I say to people, it's that place that really gets you excited. It's scary, but it's not dangerous. And so I spend time with people, and we just whiteboard it. And I have the workbook as a side piece in case people want to do the workbook on their own. But the vision and the clarity that people have when they do this allows them to say, well, okay, let's go back to where you are today, personally, professionally, health wise. And those two comparisons are like, I'm here today, but I really want to be here. You would be
Hmm.
surprised how many people really do have this clarity. They just don't say it out loud. And I've done exercise where people in groups who
Amazing.
don't know each other share all this information, but they never tell people that are close to them because they're afraid of being judged. And so what happened over time, the younger generation asked me, can you put this into a video format? Because I want to do module 1, 2, like much more systematic about how I answer it. And I want you to give me more insight into why I'm doing the work and what the benefit is of me doing the work. So I now have it up on my YouTube site, and you can literally go on there and take the videos and the workbook and do them at your pace. So you have a
Amazing.
complete picture. And that has been what a lot of people that I work with say to me, I've never had that clarity. And clarity matters because you're going to be asking somebody for help. And one of the
Hmm.
most frustrating things on a TED talk I did when I was studying asking for help is people don't ask for help because they're afraid of being judged. So they never ask. But if you have clarity, the person on the other end is going to be so clear on what you're looking for help for. Most people, I think the numbers are so high, it's 80% of the people want to help you. They just don't know what
Mm-hmm.
you're looking for. So when you ask them, hey, I need help, and you clarify this is where I'm trying to get to, there's a high chance that they get lifted up by helping you. And so the workbook is to get you that clarity. And I've got the videos to help. It seems like a lot of younger people really like the video series versus just a workbook. They really like to work through it and watch me talk about it and answer a lot of questions. That's why I created it. I think it's been incredibly helpful for people who want to
Yeah.
put the work in. If not, it's a lot of work. I mean, I spend a lot of
Yes.
time putting it together. And if you want to put the work into it, some people I coach, they call me and I will coach them. Otherwise, they can do it on their own.
Totally. I love it. I love it. Yeah, and even as we wrap up, I know you have a very robust digital presence on YouTube and other areas, LinkedIn, where I found you, where you have a lot of these resources, and I would love for you to just throw those links out, and we'll go ahead and provide them in the show notes for this episode. But so good. I just think, yeah, clarity, doing the hard work to get to that point of clarity makes all the difference, right? And
Yeah.
when you don't put in the hard work, then you're meandering, you're shooting in the dark, and that's what most leaders are doing. So
Yeah.
even to have a systematic way to work through that and have an engaging process like a video series to help with a guided workbook, I think it slows us down to think about these things, and even as I'm hearing it, I'm like, we kind of need that. We kind of, it's one thing to have the video, but it's something else to have the workbook where you can actually take notes and like really get into the topics. And that's when you're really getting into it. And to have that added coaching is even better, because you'll kind of accelerate through it faster in those ways. So good.
And
What
you
a
just
wonderful
have
tool.
to. The other thing is there is a thing I call personal trust communities, which are you're going to need people to get you from here to there. The other thing I run into a lot is people go, it's called head trash. They say, I can't get there for all these reasons. But if you build this trust community of people that help you physically, intellectually, emotionally, socially, and spiritually, and identify those people in your life, that's how you get from here to there. You need that trust community piece, which is part of the video series. You got to figure out either you
Ooh.
have them and don't realize it, or you don't have them and you need them. And I've had someone gave me this 8, 9 years ago is this idea of a trampoline. And I was doing this at Northeastern University, and I was describing a trampoline, and you're bouncing in the middle of the trampoline, having a great day, but then you start having a bad day. This group of people moves the trampoline so you stay centered as much as you can versus falling off, which is the idea of being judged. This group doesn't judge you, they just move the trampoline to keep you centered. If you keep going off and you're all over the place, this group does stop and say, hold on, what's going on? Let's talk about it. So they're addressing it, but they're not judging you. They're just trying to help you get centered again. And one of the young ladies, a student, she was a junior, said to me, Mr. Thorne, what happens as I get older? Does the trampoline get heavier? Does it get higher? Does it get bigger? Or do the same people stay with you on that trampoline? And this was back in
Mm,
2017. I hadn't thought about it that far back. I was like,
it's a great
great
question.
question.
Yeah.
I have some people that I've had with me since fourth grade, and then other people are brand new in the last 5 years. So I said, for me, it's been an evolution. Some people are still with me, but a lot of people have changed because my needs have changed and my life has changed. So I have different people, but there's some same and some not. I thought it was an
Mm,
interesting insight that she had for me. But yeah, it's just like how do you have that trusted community that build that courageous space where they're going to hold you accountable, but they won't judge you?
mhm.
That's a big thing. You'll never get from here to there unless you have that group of people.
I love it. That's so good. That's so good. I think even that's what Vistage is, right? Like I know that for me,
Yeah,
um, that's been a huge proponent of bringing some clarity to my business, shining some light on some blind spots. Even just hearing other leaders talk about their spots, that
yeah,
it does something. That community does something.
yeah,
And then even to that point, people that have been with you for many times, as you were saying that, I was thinking about relationships I had, and those relationships evolve as well. That relationship that might have been one that you received a lot from, all of a sudden that becomes a relationship where you're giving to, but there's You know what I mean? Like those things change, those dynamics change as people get older and positions and responsibilities change. And but the thing is, that's the beautiful thing about relationship. It's give and take. Um, and now all of a sudden you're learning to bring something to that relationship that maybe you didn't before, and that person's learning to receive something new, right? And I think that kind of touches on to, even as we round out the conversation here, um, as we look to, just to ask this last question, and then, I'd love for you to kind of share just your digital blueprint where people can find you. But, with new generations entering the workforce, how do you see leadership evolving and changing? I think, I guess the question's two part in that. One, what would you say to a younger generation that's appealing to an older generation and wanting to take that good stuff from them to pull it through into the next generation? And what do you say to that older generation that maybe feels stuck, and they have all this good stuff that they built and they have a track record, but aren't really passing the baton in that way? How how should this be handled? This change in transition that's happening right now?
Number one, intellectual curiosity is by far the biggest skill that leaders need to have, especially young ones coming up. Really learn to be curious versus judging. So a lot of times when you're looking at an older leader, you're
Mm,
judging. Instead of that, saying, what can I learn from these people would be my thing. And then try to find times where you could experience learning opportunities with them would be my recommendation going up. Going the other way, it's the same thing. We hear all these stories, and I listen to them all the time, where leaders my generation say, oh, these young people, this, that, and the other thing. I think we need one thing I would say is our generation grew up and we were always asking, how am I supposed to do what you're asking me to go do?
yeah.
This generation coming up, the generation coming up, are asking, why are we doing this?
Mm,
And often we get very frustrated with that versus we just say, well, I just told, just do it. And so, again, being intellectually curious and trying to understand where these people are coming from that are coming up in the organization. And again, don't judge, be curious, and see where it goes. I think going both ways is very similar style. You just got to be patient. You got to be
yes.
curious. And then when you really need that younger person in your organization to get something done, and you walk over there and said, I need you right now, they're going to be saying, what do you need versus why are we doing this again? That's what takes, that's building that trust over time. That's what I would suggest as a starting point.
Fantastic. I think that's a wonderful place to end. I think well, yeah, exactly. I think that there's work to do on both sides. And first of all, curiosity, us asking questions, digging in, being meaningfully interested, whether you're younger or whether you've been doing it for a while, and engaging in those real conversations, I think makes all the difference and will make the difference in that successful transition. So, um, Mike, this has been a fantastic conversation.
Great. I'm glad to hear. Thank you.
I know personally I've received so much from this, and I'm excited to get this out to our audience. And to our audience, if you've listened this far, I just want to thank you for taking the time to learn along with us here, as Mike has shared some fantastic words of wisdom from his experiences. Mike, if people want to find you, learn more about the things that you've shared today, where can they find you?
You could go to LinkedIn, obviously, as you mentioned. My YouTube site is at Mike Thorne Leadership, would be where I've got a lot of videos on that you can watch. And I do have my own website. It's trustinside.co. You can go there also.
Wonderful. Well, there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Appreciate your time and your interest. Lots to learn here, lots to take away. We'll go ahead and drop these links in the show notes for you to go ahead and just easily click on and uh, go to those resources and leverage this. And again, you can find Mike on LinkedIn and connect with him there and see all the wonderful work that he's doing. I know he's very active on social, seen videos, and that's one of the things that drew me to him. So again, Mike, thank you so much. And to our audience, if you want to continue seeing episodes like this, go ahead and click the follow and subscribe button on YouTube. We're also found wherever you get your podcast. We're on all the major platforms. So appreciate you joining us for this journey. And until next time.